Thank you to the core team for inviting me here today, but also a big thank you to you for coming out to learn and to better understand your industry. So every day we use words, but do we really know what they mean? So today's theme is understanding, and when I started putting this presentation together, I thought I better define the word understanding. So I consulted everyone's best friend, Google. Here's what we got. So, definition of understanding. We have 4 ones for some reason, but we'll start with the first one. The first one being a mental grasp or comprehension. So, I have no understanding of mixology. Number 2 would be intellect. I have the facilities to understand Italian. Number 3, an informal agreement or an arrangement. So, he and I, we had an arrangement. And the 4th one would be a sympathetic awareness, consideration. This is a topic that is heavy, and to work on it, it takes understanding. And this is where I'm going to focus today. Now, when we look at this, we can see that there are synonyms here. Decency, humanity, compassion, and the exact opposite, the antonyms, ignorance, indifference. So, you might be wondering, what do these 2 photos have in common? It's a trick question because what really is in common is just me. So in the first photo, as you can see, I'm standing in front of a bunch of vodka. This photo was taken in Vienna, where my family produces alcohol. The second photo is me kissing an elephant named Didi in Thailand. So before we get started today, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my journey and how I came here. So I grew up in the alcohol industry. Our family company, we have 2, Narit Gessler and Jay Bachevsky. They've been around for over 200 years, and it has stayed in my family the entire time. We used to be the purveyors to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and today our vodka Monopolova is sold globally. Now, there's another part of me. I also have a master's in human rights, and this is what took me to Thailand to do pro bono work with an anti-trafficking organization. And it was here that I was introduced to mahouts. Now, mahouts are elephant trainers. So when you think you go to Thailand and you see tourism and people are spending time with elephants, who's training them? I came to learn that many of the mahouts had actually been trafficked from neighboring Burma. And let me tell you, during those 6 months in Thailand, I had some bad days. We all have bad days. But what I came to understand there is that people in slavery, every day is the worst day of their lives. And this is how I came to work for my current organization, Free the Slaves. And our mission is to liberate people that are enslaved and to change the conditions that allow slavery to persist. So today, I'm standing here before you as somebody that's very much a part of your industry, but I'm also an anti-slavery advocate. So, slavery isn't legal anywhere, but it happens everywhere. How many people learned in school that slavery was abolished? I did. That was definitely what I was told. Let's talk a little bit about that. So, trafficking and slavery, these 2 words, they can often be intertwined and a little confusing. The way we understand trafficking is really the movement of a person from one place to another. But slavery is what happens once they arrive. Now, legally, these are protected under the same laws, and people don't have to be moved for laws to apply for trafficking and slavery. So let's take a look at what the UN says. Now, the UN is taking a look at definitions, and the act, the means, and the purpose. So the way I like to think of it is what, why, how. Let's flip them around a little bit. So what? You're being trafficked. How? By means of violence. And for what purpose? Slavery. Modern day slavery shows up in many forms these days. We see debt bondage. This is where people are paying off a loan and they get enslaved. Contract slavery. This often happens when contracts are misrepresented. They're falsified. People get stuck. Serfdom, something we used to hear about maybe back in Shakespeare's days. This still exists. This is when people are tied for generations to the land that they're on. We have forced labor, domestic servitude, sex trafficking, forced marriage, child slavery, and worst forms of child labor. Now that last one, what differentiates it from the one above is really the hazardous working conditions that the children are in. This can be often fatal environments. So slavery by the numbers. This is no small issue. Slavery generates $150 billion every year for traffickers on the backs of more than 40 million people. Of that, 50% are in forced labor, 71% are women, and over 25% are children under the age of 25. Now, let's jump back to the 1800s. In the 1800s, if I wanted to buy a slave, it would cost me about $1,000. And at the time, that could be anywhere from 3 to 6 times the amount of the American salary. So it was an investment. Today, that amount would be around $40,000. But today, you can buy a bonded laborer for $12. There is no investment. These slaves are disposable. And if they die, there's another one waiting to take their place. So that brings us to today. How does this all relate? So everyone's sort of heard of supply chains, and the way we can think of it is that you have a finished product, but it was probably made in a factory somewhere, and eventually you get back to the raw materials. Across the entire supply chain, you will find instances of slavery. So let's think about this. It's in the cigarettes that we smoke, it's in the cell phones that we use, it's in our clothing, it's in the food that we eat, the medicines that we take, it's in the buildings that we sit in, and it was probably just in your lunch. All right, let's see if you guys can help me out here. Who can spot slavery in this picture? Anyone? Any brave souls? All right, I'll help you. What was that? T-shirt. T-shirt. Okay, I got a T-shirt. Good one. Anyone else? Glasses? Limes. Okay. Yes. So, today, these are the 5 things I'll be talking about. It's in our furniture, electronics, simple syrup, clothing, and alcohol. So do you really know what's behind your bar? Let's talk a little bit about furniture. I'm going to specifically talk about steel. So these benches that you're all sitting on, if you look underneath them, steel. Now, a big component in steel is pig iron. And in order to make pig iron, you need charcoal. And in order to make charcoal, you need to burn wood. So this particular picture here, this was taken from Free the Slaves in Brazil. Now, Brazil was the last country in the Americas to outlaw slavery in 1888. However, most of the iron, most of the pig iron that goes into steel this day can be traced back to Brazil. These workers are working in hazardous conditions. They often are breathing in chemicals. They live in places that don't have latrines or electricity, and they're forced to be there. Electronics. Everyone in this room has a smartphone. Now, smartphones contain over 70 minerals, one of them being coltan. Coltan is in all of our cell phones, and it is mined in the Democratic Republic of the Congo by children. Now, these mines are not formal. They're holes in the ground. They can flood with water. They can collapse. This is an extremely hazardous place for a child to work. Now, on top of that, the mines usually have sex trafficking going on around them because the people that own the mines want to stay occupied. Now, I think about this, and I think about my cell phone and all of our cell phones, and can you imagine if just one of the major retailers said, I'm not going to buy any coltan that was tainted with child slavery? What a difference that would make for those kids in the Congo. A huge one. Simple syrup, everyone's favorite sweetener. This goes into the majority of cocktails, right? Now, simple syrup is really just a combination of what? Water and sugar. Sugar, 170 million tons is produced annually. But where does it come from? So the raw ingredient for sugar is sugarcane. Now, how do we harvest sugarcane? Sugarcane, often the fields are burned, and this gets rid of dead organic material. And then people have to go in with machetes and hack them down to get the sugarcane. Now, sugarcane has a very short shelf life. It needs to go into production pretty much immediately. Someone has to haul it. It has to be pulverized. We get raw sugar out of there, and from the raw sugar, it gets sent somewhere else for refinement to come to you to make simple syrup. But unfortunately, what we see in agriculture, and especially in sugar plantations, children as young as 5 are being put into the plantations. They cannot leave. On top of it, women are often sexually assaulted if they're working there. So let's talk clothing. Everyone here is pretty much wearing a t-shirt at some point. That means that 70% of all of our clothes in here probably have cotton in them. Now, cotton needs to be picked, often by little hands. It needs to be spun and woven into thread, into yarn, and then it will go to a factory where it is turned into your t-shirt. Now, I don't know if any of you remember this, but in 2013, a big factory collapsed in Bangladesh. It killed 1,500 people and injured an additional 2,500. Now, this particular instance makes me pretty angry. When they've talked to workers, they've found out that the workers the day before started hearing the building creaking, moaning. They saw cracks coming down the walls. They weren't allowed to leave. Can you imagine sitting in there knowing this building is going to collapse on you? They didn't have a choice because they were enslaved. So let's talk alcohol. Alcohol can be made from many products. We have wheat, corn, potatoes, rice, fruit. All of these things are done with agriculture. Agriculture specifically targets migrant workers. It targets people that are moving because of seasonality. Here we see contract slavery. We see horrible working conditions. We see many, many, many long hours. And no matter what kind of alcohol you're using, if you trace back that raw ingredient, chances are good you're going to come to slavery inside of the alcohol industry. So you're probably sitting here wondering, okay, there's some big issues going on here. What's happening? The truth is, not a lot, but some. So we now have 5 places with modern-day slavery acts: California, the UK, France, Germany, and Australia. The regulations are coming. So even if your only purpose is to sit there and think, as a business owner, I should get this in check, fine. But you should also do it because it's the right thing to do. Transparency right now is going to lead to accountability, and eventually that leads to liability. That's where we're hoping to see these modern-day slavery acts going. Just about a week ago, Theresa May was presenting to the International Labor Conference, where she was really urging other governments to put modern-day slavery acts into place. And specifically, she says, quote, "Buying something from a company that uses slave labor should not be any less socially unacceptable than using a disposable cup." 10 years ago, single-use plastics were fine. We all use them. Today, companies are taking them out of their supply chains because they know how consumers feel. Right now, we have an opportunity. We are the next generation. We can join an anti-slavery movement, and we can make a difference as consumers to say, we don't want this in our supply chains. So what can you do? How do you take action? There's a lot of different ways. The first is to get educated. As we talked about, many of us learned that slavery was abolished. Not true. You can learn about where it's happening, with what products. You can trace it. You can look at iLab's Sweat and Toil. You can look up a lime and see where are the worst places to source lime from. You can, for instance, go onto Made in a Free World and check out your own slavery footprint. Or you can order your t-shirts. I mean, how many bars have branded t-shirts in them? Like mine from Freeset, which is a very cool company that's working in India, and they employ trafficking survivors. They give them skills, they give them a fair wage, and then they help them reintegrate back into their homes. So you have a choice. Everyone has a role in this industry, whether you're a brewer, a distiller, whether you're a company owner, a bar owner, a brand ambassador, or a bartender, you can do something. Even if it's to come up with a really creative cocktail and maybe partner with a nonprofit and give some of the proceeds back. You have a voice and you can use it. So I want to give you just a quick video to see what freedom looks like. say after the video. There's something we call the freedom dividend. And so it's all of the things that come out of freedom. If you're not free, you can't get an education, you can't go to the doctor, you can't do all of the things that we enjoy today. So pretty much everything that we do, it starts with freedom, and freedom starts with you. So lastly, we know from our original definitions that understanding equals decency. It's the same as humanity, and it's the same as compassion. Now that you know about this, we're talking about changing lives. The products that you use, that you sell, that you distribute, and how they relate back to the people that make them. You are free, and you have a choice, whereas many others do not. And so I'll leave you with a final thought, which is that there's an old saying that says, knowledge is power, but knowledge without action is useless. Thank you.